So I recorded a few topics here, and then I packed everything up, and I got all the way back to my car, and I just couldn't leave. It's just too beautiful here. I just couldn't leave. So I'll just come back and do a few more topics. How about that? So what I want to talk to you about, and anyway, this finishes off our discussion of markup. I want to talk to you about some of the things that you need to think about when you're working with markup. And the first one, and really maybe the biggest one that you'll confront the most, is this idea of white space. White space, very simply, it's not a difficult concept. It's very simply, it's paragraph marks, that's carriage returns and line feeds, right? Soft carriage returns and hard carriage returns, tabs, and spaces. That's what really the definition of white space is. They're all those things that we use in order to create space. And white space, when you type it into your markup file, you generally are using it in order to separate things and to see what's related to what. And most importantly, to kind of get the idea of parentage. It's really difficult to see whose parent is whose when you don't have indentation, right? Our eyes are really keyed to this idea of an outline. And what defines the outline is indents. What are indents? Indents are white space. White space is the indentation made with tabs or spaces or carriage returns or whatever it is we use to create that spacing. And that's what gives us as humans the feeling that something is inside something else. And I'm sure you've had the experience of opening up a web page and looking at the tags of the web page, and it's completely incomprehensible. And not really because the markup is so complicated, although the markup can be complicated, but mostly because the white space is missing. And that's kind of the point here. Markup processors, by and large, don't pay any attention to white space. If you have one space in between something versus three spaces in between something, doesn't matter. It's all compressed down to one space. So you'll have to get used to the nuance of this, because sometimes when you're working, for example, in XML, as we will be, sometimes those spaces show up, and for good reason, and sometimes they don't. You'll just have to get a feeling for when a space counts and when it doesn't count, when the space is compressed entirely versus when you get a space. But in all cases, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, they all get compressed down to one space. So the point I want to make here, and kind of the more philosophical point, is we depend heavily on white space. Look at the layout of any page and you'll see that the place where there isn't text and images and whatever is as important to you as the place where there is. That creates the feeling of coherency. That creates the set of relationships. That shows what's superordinate and what's subordinate. Superordinate things are big and they're spaced larger. They have a lot more space around them. Smaller things, subordinate things, are smaller with less space around them. We depend very heavily on white space in order to understand what's going on. And parsers, XML, HTML interpreters, they don't pay any attention at all. Unfortunately, in HTML, once you have a page that has white space removed from it, it's very difficult. There are tools that'll do it, but it's very difficult to put all that white space back in. Fortunately for us, when we work with XML, our tools have a button, and you press that button and it puts all the right white space back in, and it's extremely convenient, and it makes things nice and tidy, and you feel like now you understand exactly what's going on in the file, where before it became incomprehensible, and it was mostly because the nesting of the file was not consistent with your understanding of the white space between higher and lower order things. So that's the idea of white space. It's ignored by HTML processors, it's ignored by XML processors, but it's really important for us, and so we have to find ways of preserving that white space.